It's that time of year where we are all doing so much reflecting on the year that has just passed before our eyes because seriously, guys, how the hell did we get to December of 2024 already? But on today's podcast episode, I just want to give y'all a little overview of some of the lessons that I learned this year, some of the big moments, the words that I would use to describe this year, and just the overall gist of what I experienced because this year was very different compared to the years prior since starting my intentional manifestation journey. And at moments, I thought that that was a bad thing, but coming to this point in time and being where I'm at right now, I know that all of it played out exactly as it was supposed to, and I want to share some of the beautiful lessons that I learned from it. What's up, and welcome to the That's So Rich podcast, the show that's redefining wealth and helping you manifest a life that is rich in every single way. I'm your host, Kat Kozad, transformation coach, manifestation expert, and spiritual guide, and together we're going to create your happiest, healthiest, and wealthiest life. I'm so happy you're here. Let's do this thing. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of That's So Rich. Whoa, was 2024 a doozy for anybody beside me? I can imagine it was because over the past few weeks, I feel so lucky. I've been a part of so many incredible circles here in New York City where I've gotten to connect with other people and talk about what's happened for them throughout their year. I've had so many conversations with my friends and just my clients in general over the course of the year. And 2024 felt like it was kind of a wild one for all of us. And I wanted to share a bit about my year. One of my favorite things about some of these podcast episodes are the podcast episodes that I have absolutely no agenda for, because I'll oftentimes just say whatever comes up and is on my heart, and then I'll finish the podcast recording and I'll be like, did I even say anything of substance? And then I'll go back and listen to it and I'm like, oh, that was pretty good actually. So that's what we have in store today. There's absolutely no agenda for everything that I want to share with you on today's podcast episode, but I basically just want to share what 2024 was like for me, because at points of this year, it was the happiest I've ever been. And then I also had some of the lowest moments that I've ever had in my entire life. Questionably the lowest moment that I've had in my entire life, or at least since finding intentional manifestation and being on this personal development journey. And so to kick this off, I want to give you the 3 words that kind of encapsulate 2024 for me. The other day, I was at a breathwork activation where they were asking us what were our top 3 words for 2024. And while I was there, I could only come up with one, which was confusing. And then once I did a bit more reflection and continued to dive into not only my photo album for the year and actually going back and seeing what happened this year, but just recalling the memories, having conversations with friends. I was actually walking to one of the beautiful Christmas markets here in New York City the other evening with 2 of my girlfriends, and I asked them the same question: what are the 3 words that you would describe 2024 as? And as I was in conversation with them, my other 2 came up. So the 3 words that describe 2024 for me were confusing, community, and faith. And so with each of those, I want to break those down and share some of the lessons that were involved in each of them. But starting off with confusing. So confusing has tied over from 2023 into 2024. If you've been here and listened to the podcast, you'll know that in 2023, I kind of had this entrepreneurial identity crisis and this like midlife existential moment, not midlife, quarter life. There we go. Quarter life crisis moment where I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And like, do I actually want any of this? Is this my dream or is this somebody else's dream for me? Because I had manifested everything that I wanted on paper, but there was still a part of me that felt unfulfilled and was trying to understand what that was. And through the process of 2023 and 2024, I really uncovered that so much of that was because I have actively been trying to be somewhere that I'm not. And what I mean by that is not allowing myself to be so fully present in the moment and instead being so obsessed and focused on what it's going to be like when I hit a milestone, or when things are happening a certain way in my business, or I have the partner or the apartment or the house or the things that I want. And I think that this is something that so many people experience, is almost like this unhealthy obsession with the next milestone, the next big thing that they call into their lives, as opposed to being obsessed with where they're at. So that ties into the first major lesson that I've learned throughout 2024, which is that being obsessed with where you are right now is so much more important than being obsessed with where you're trying to get to. So the confusion for me really tied in this way of the fact that I felt like I was doing everything quote unquote right. I was working really hard in my business. I was working with business mentors. I was doing all of these things that on paper, again, I thought I should be doing, but I wasn't getting the result that I had in the past. And there was even like a 2-month period of time this year where it felt like my business almost came to like a complete standstill, where there was absolutely like no new business coming in. And that was terrifying for me, mostly because I live in New York City, which is quite literally listed as the most expensive city in the world, but also because that was something that I had never seen before. When I started my business in January of 2020, my business essentially took off really quickly and had just continued to grow from that point. And this is the first year since starting my business that my business didn't grow. And by grow, I mean grow financially. I didn't hit new milestones. I didn't hit greater upper limits. And that was such a kick to the ego, because that was something in the past few years that I really didn't recognize at the time. I was priding myself on the fact that no matter what, I always reach new heights. I always reach past the boundaries that I thought were possible. And this year, that just didn't happen, which made me question my ability to manifest the money and the things that I desire into my life. And there was even this period of time where I was like, what the fuck? Like, I can help anybody manifest what it is that they want into their lives, but I'm having a really hard time getting to where I want to be with my manifestations. And again, the obsession of trying to be somewhere else as opposed to being obsessed with where I was. I spent like a 2.5 month period in the fall where I just felt so drained, depleted, sad, scared, and like trying to push forward in a way that I had in the past, especially like my first year of business when I was just in like hustle mode, force mode, get shit done mode. And finally I came to this place of remembering that old keys will not open new doors, and the season of things slowing down was happening for a reason, and that I wouldn't be in that position if there wasn't something there for me. And so after fighting myself, oh my gosh, I just felt like I was fighting myself every single day to like keep the fear and the ego thoughts at bay. And finally came to this place of like, okay, what if I stop fighting? What if I just stop fighting and turn so much more into the faith that I had been developing, especially, I mean, since I started my intentional manifestation journey, but like especially since the end of 2023, I've stepped so fully into a relationship with God. And prior to this year, I had a lot of like embarrassment, even shame, or like weird, funky energy claiming the divine for myself as God, because I didn't grow up with religion. I grew up with a dad who was the son of a pastor, and he completely like resisted and revolted against religion. I grew up with a mom who was raised Catholic, but had a ton of Catholic guilt. And so like religion and God in my household growing up felt very funky. I remember at times there was even like me questioning God to my dad and him just completely shutting me down. Or like there was, I don't know if anybody remembers this, but there was a guy who tightroped across the Grand Canyon, and they presented it live. And this guy who was walking across the Grand Canyon. The entire time he was doing it, he was talking out loud to himself, and he just kept thanking God for his safety. And he kept on saying God, Jesus, over and over. And my dad literally had to turn it off because he was like, this guy's so fucking stupid for thinking that God is going to protect him for walking across the Grand Canyon, and like was so triggered by it. So there was a lot of weird energy surrounding religion, surrounding faith, surrounding God in my household growing up. And as I got a bit older, I started to identify it as the universe. And I believe the universe, God, source, spirit, they're all interchangeable. Any of these words that you use for the divine. But for me, there was a huge resistance to like claiming God. And in 2024, I finally was able to claim God and allow God to claim me and to develop a relationship of my own, not through the church, not through how other people were telling me I should develop a relationship with God, but through actually just going through periods of time where it felt as though faith was the only thing that I could lean on. And because of those periods of time, I grew this insanely beautiful, deeply connected relationship to God, to Jesus, to my angels, to all of these divine essences, these divine powers. And like I was saying, I was at this breaking point where I was like, okay, I have to stop fighting myself. And it's time to turn even further into my faith, even further than I had before. And I have never felt more at peace now, especially given the fact that, again, prior to this moment, or prior to the moment where I stopped fighting myself and allowed God into my life in an even bigger way than I had before, I thought that I was surrendering. I thought that I was like, okay, God, like, I'm surrendering fully over to you. Whatever it is that you want me to do, I will do, and I will lead forward in that way. But I was actually still fighting every single day to try to hold on to the old identity of this version of myself who had it all put together and was always reaching new heights in terms of her finances, in terms of what I'm doing in my business, in terms of my relationships, in terms of the opportunities and whatnot that I get here in New York City. And I didn't realize how much of that was still operating from control of this like lack of trust in the fact that God actually has my back and is going to take me where I need to be, and that place is most likely so much better than what I'm trying to figure out on my own. And I want to reiterate that because oftentimes when you hear the topic of surrender when it comes to manifestation or faith and creating your dreams or whatever it may be, there's this aspect of surrender where you're like, okay, well, I trust the universe. Yep, I trust the universe. I trust God. I trust source that I'm ultimately going to be led to where I need to be. But then you're still fighting, like I was, every single day, fighting to try and make a result happen that just wasn't happening. And that's not surrender. We can say to ourselves all day long, yep, I'm surrendered to God. I'm surrendered to the universe. I'm surrendered to the flow of life and what is going to happen, but then still actively be fighting every single day for something that divine power is trying to force out of your hands. And for myself, I'm so grateful. One of the things that I had a lot of fear sharing when I first started my coaching business, and honestly, even probably up until the last few months, I had a lot of fear of like sharing these behind the scenes things of where it's not so pretty, where it's not so fun, where it's not so pleasant, because there's been the ego story attached to it of if you don't have it all put together, people aren't going to trust you. If you're not always on top of it, people aren't going to follow along. If you're not whatever, some unrealistic expectation of any sort of human being, then you're not a good coach. You're not a good guide. You're not somebody who can take other people through this. And the biggest reframe happened for me this year when my lovely friend Paul, who maybe I'll have on the podcast at some point, but he's one of my nearest, dearest friends here in New York City. I was telling him the challenging time that I was going through in terms of the business and not reaching the financial goals that I wanted to reach, and all of just like the shit that was happening. And he was like, okay, and you feel bad about this, why? And I started to tell him why I felt bad about it. And he was like, Kat, you do realize that this is exactly what you're signed up to do. Like, nobody can actually trust you if you don't walk the walk first. Nobody, like, your value as a coach wouldn't be the value that it is if everything just worked out so perfectly for you and you didn't experience obstacles as well. Kind of like how nobody would relate with Taylor Swift's music if Taylor Swift hadn't been through all of the heartbreak and all of the challenges that she's been through, but still continues to show up and share her voice and write her songs so that everybody is able to follow along with the melody and know that they are a part of this as well. And I was just like, oh my God, okay, 100%. Because to be completely honest, I feel as though there was a period of time over the past few years where I felt like I was unrelatable because things actually were just playing out so perfectly in my life, and like in a way where there wasn't a ton of challenge or hardship or unexpected things that I had to deal with, at least in terms of like money and my business. And as soon as I heard that and I realized that and I recognized that I was so hyper focused on this one tiny aspect of my life, because money and business and careers, that's just a small portion of your life, just a small portion of my life. There was finally this like opening up of like, oh, okay, I'm going through this season where it feels like things are at a standstill, where it feels like things are at a halt, but this is literally just a small portion of my life. And there's so much that is happening that is actually working out for me, that is feeling so good. And not that that wasn't working out for me either, because I believe so fully in the fact that it was and it has played out so perfectly for me, because in those months where things weren't going the way that I wanted them to in my business, it gave me the opportunity to reassess, and it gave me the opportunity to ask myself what was working for me and what wasn't, and ultimately develop that, again, muscle inside of myself, that strength, that faith in the fact that even when it feels like things aren't working out in my favor, they always are. And so that was a huge lesson for me this year, that being so obsessed with where you're trying to go is not actually what allows you to experience life to its fullest, which, like, duh. We hear all of these things all the time of be present, be in the present moment, everything that you want exists here and now. But actually having these experiences where you live them and you feel them inside of your body, at least for me, that's what I feel as though I need to do. I've never actually learned anything from just hearing somebody say it. I've always been the person who needs to like go and have the experience in order for me to feel like I've actually learned it and then be able to share those lessons with other people. But the other lesson that I learned during that season, as well as just like 2023 and 2024 in general, is that if you're not where you want to be, it's perhaps because that's not actually where you're meant to be going. And this may sound weird, especially given a lot of the things out there surrounding manifestation and like creating the life of your dreams, which is choose what it is that you want and like relentlessly go towards that thing. And I have been taking a completely different approach of I am only accepting God's plan as the plan for my life. I only want for myself what God wants for me, and approaching life in this way of just being so much more open to the conversations, to the synchronicities, to the clues, to whatever it may be. And I think it's funny because we talk about intentional manifestation in this way of being so hyper-focused on what it is that you want and relentlessly pursuing that. But if you actually take a broader perspective or look at manifestation, one of the top rules is to stay open to how things are going to unfold. It's having this level of detachment from what it is that you want, knowing that you'll either get that or something greater. And so for like when I first started my intentional manifestation journey, I was so hyper focused on the fact that I wanted to be like the next Tony Robbins, the next Gabby Bernstein, the next like some of these big players in the industry. And over the past year, I'm like, I don't. And that was really interesting for me, where I had a completely new dream kind of set into place and got super honest with myself about the fact that I don't think that was ever my dream in the first place. It was just a stepping stone to get me to where I am right now, which I'm so ridiculously grateful for. And anything that I talk about in terms of the realizations that I've had or the past experiences that led me to this very moment, I speak about all of them with so much gratitude and so much love for the fact that they've led me to this experience, because I think it's really easy to look back and be like, oh, well, that wasn't right, or that wasn't my dream, or that wasn't the right experience for me to take to where I am now. And it's like, no, actually, I needed every single one of those puzzle pieces to get to where I am right now. I'm just realizing that the puzzle is bigger than I thought it was, and there's so much more to be able to put into all of it. And so this year, again, through the lens of faith and through just like leaning so hard on what is it that God wants for me? What is it that I am being led to? I had this crazy string of synchronicities happen, and I can't remember if I've talked about this on the podcast yet. I don't think that I have, because I think it happened during the few-month window that I took off from podcasting. But there was this really crazy string of synchronicities where one of my dear friends and clients came to the city, and she was talking to me about a book called The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, for anybody who's listening who has either read the book or wants to go read the book, because I highly, highly suggest reading it. But she was talking to me about this book called The Midnight Library, and without giving too much of it away, essentially, the concept of the book is this girl who's experiencing mental health issues goes to this metaphysical library where she has the opportunity to see what her life would be like if she took any specific route. And there's infinite different paths that she could take. So essentially like parallel universes, what she's doing in other spaces, so on and so forth. And realizing that there was a different path that she could take in life. And the day that Shay gave that to me, I actually stepped away from my apartment for about 40 minutes to go check on a friend who was experiencing her own mental health issues that day. And when I came back, my doorman was like, hey, Shay left a present for you. And I was like, what? Like, I had no clue that, one, Shay knew my address. Two, I thought she was on a plane back to Atlanta. And three, I was like, wow, that's just so thoughtful. And so I get the book from her, and the next day I then go to Central Park with one of my very best friends and was having a conversation with her about how Shay dropped the book off for me and how I was really excited to read it. And she was immediately like, oh my God, Kat, I actually got that same book from the people who reached out to me that want to publish one of my books, because she is also being pursued for her writing and for her gifts and talents. And they were somebody who suggested this book to her. And so she had a copy of the book too, but had yet to read it, and went home and had a conversation with her mom on the phone about how crazy synchronistic it was that both her and I received that book and both wanted to read it. To then her mom saying, oh my gosh, I also picked up that book today and decided that I wanted to read it. So there's 3 people in the span of 48 hours who all received this book. And then fast forward to the end of that week, my best friend Helena, who lives in Colorado, was coming out to visit, and she got to New York. We were up on my roof and we were just like catching up, and I asked her how her flight was. She said it was good. I just finished the rest of my book on the flight. And when I asked her what the book was, she said The Midnight Library. And I screamed. And I think I really freaked her out and was like, oh my God, what is happening? Why is Kat reacting like this? To which then I told her the story that I just told you guys. But I then took the following Monday off after Helena left the city and went back to Colorado. I took that day off and read the entirety of the Midnight Library. And as I was reading it, was just having so many light bulbs in my head go off surrounding the fact that I had manifested all of the dreams that I had for myself, and I hadn't reassessed what my dreams were, and that I was actively helping everybody pursue what their dreams are, but hadn't, again, asked myself, okay, now that I'm in this position, what is my dream? And now I'm going to have us rewind a little bit. So I hope that you're following with me because this is a little confusing. But at the beginning of the year, I kept on getting sick. Time and time again, I was just getting sick. And on the fourth time getting sick, I woke up in the middle of the night because I was in so much pain and my body was aching. I had the aches, the pains, the chills, the fever, like all of the things. Took a bath, and when I got out of the bath, I wrapped myself up in 2 giant blankets on my couch, and I just started to sob. And I said out loud, God, I have no clue what you want me to do, but I give up, and I'm listening, and I'm going to do whatever it is that you say. And almost immediately, I received the message back, write about your life as if it was a movie. And so I took that as, okay, start to script about how I want my life to be from this point moving forward, talk about my husband, talk about what I want to happen in my business, where I want to live, all of those different things. And that was that. Now, fast forward back to after reading the Midnight Library. The next day after reading the book, I sat down for meditation again, and I said the same thing. Okay, God, I have no clue what you want me to do, but if you tell me, I will listen and I will make it happen. And again, almost immediately, I received the message, write about your life as if it was a movie. And this time it wasn't okay, I need to script. It was this like full body chills, full realization of the fact that I needed to write about my life experience and some of the things that I haven't talked about here on the podcast or on my online platforms yet, in terms of like my relationship to alcohol, my relationship to sex and sexuality, my relationship to the periods of time where I was experiencing hopelessness and suicidal ideation, and like the really nitty gritty, gross parts of my story, and being able to share that perspective. So the book that I am currently writing, I said that I wasn't gonna tell anybody what it was gonna be, but you know, if you listen to this podcast episode, I guess you get to know. But it's gonna be a fiction inspired by fact, and the only reason I say fiction is that it's gonna be a true story. I'm just changing the names of the characters, the places, the different like identifying characteristics for the sake of protecting the identities of people who have been a part of my story, because it's been pretty gruesome at points. It's been really crazy, but all of that to say that when I've returned back to the present moment, when I've slowed down, when I've reconnected to myself and to the connection that I have to faith, I was brought back to one of the things that I feel as though is like my soul's gift in being here, which is writing. And writing and creation and art and expressing myself, I feel like is something that I've kind of put to the side or put on the back burner or even forgot about for years and years, because at first it was numbed out by drinking and alcohol and partying and all of the things. And then once I quit drinking, I was so hyper focused on, again, being quote unquote successful. And whatever successful means to this past version of myself is not what it is now. I used to see success as like monetary success and like only scaling greater levels all of the time. Whereas now success is like, how do I feel at the end of the day? How connected am I to God? How connected am I to myself? How much love and compassion am I allowing myself and other people in my life? And being able to just like soften into that as opposed to be in this like nonstop going energy. But all of that to say that, like I said earlier, I think that sometimes we become so obsessed with where we think we're trying to get to that we're ignoring whether it be God, the universe, source, spirit, or anything else is trying to show as a new opportunity or as a different path to something so much greater than you could have ever imagined. And sometimes we think that changing course is giving up, when in reality, changing course is actually just following the natural flow of where your soul is trying to take you. And it's okay that things change. And I know that that's something I've talked about a lot on the podcast, because y'all have seen me time and time again decide on something and then back out of it, or get it and then be like, wait, this isn't actually what I want. And that continues to be one of my top lessons. And that's the third lesson that I'll talk about on today's podcast episode, which is that things are going to change and that's okay. Even just this morning, I was going to record this podcast episode, and I originally planned that I was going to batch record the next 3 podcast episodes all in one sitting, because that's what I used to do when I released 2 podcast episodes a week. I would sit down and I would record 4 podcast episodes at a time, and that's how I kept up with that kind of consistency. And that's just not something I'm capable of anymore. And I used to be so hard on myself for the fact that I couldn't or didn't have the capacity to be able to do that, because there's almost like a, well, you're this much further along in your business. There's this much more evidence of the fact that you can, like, why are you not doing it? Voice that would run in the back of my head, and that ran in the back of my head for so many things beyond just recording podcast episodes. And in the last few months, kind of like I was talking about with this breaking moment of like, I'm not fighting myself anymore. I'm not gonna fight myself. What the hell is the point of fighting myself on a daily basis with things that I think I should be doing versus what actually feels good, what actually feels right to me? And so that's just a micro example, but can be used as a metaphor for something so much bigger of like, things change and that's okay. If you used to do things in one way and you don't feel good doing it that way anymore, that's a sign that it's time for it to change. If you are putting yourself up to the expectation of somebody else and it doesn't feel as though it's authentic to you, it's okay to change that as well. If it feels as though you're comparing your story to somebody else's story and you're not, again, getting the results that you want from that, or you're used to being able to like put on a mask and fake it till you make it, or do whatever it is to try and fit in with that, it's okay to change. It's so okay to change. And I would say, honestly, it's so interesting, because if you would have told me in like 2022, 2023 that I could have a year where monetarily or materially I wouldn't see the results that I had seen in previous years, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's fine. That happens. But actually to live the experience and get to the other side and be like, you know what? I actually feel the best that I ever have in my entire life. And I am truly good with or without it. I know myself. I know that God has me. I know that my community has me. That was my final word for 2024. I know that my community has me, and that finally this like deep knowing inside of my brain and inside of my body that the material goods, the monetary success that I had seen was never the thing that made people love me, and was never the thing that qualified my worthiness, and that my worthiness has never been in question. And so all of this to say that this is a big mumbo jumbo of just some of the things that I experienced this year, some of the major lessons and defining moments. And one thing that I just want to thank all of you for is the fact that you continue to see me and support me in being so vulnerable with all of you. I've received some really beautiful messages over the past few months since I rebranded the podcast, and since I've been sharing just like very authentically and very vulnerably about these not so pretty parts of my life, because there was a period of time where I was genuinely so scared. Like, if you would have asked me to record this podcast episode even at the beginning of the year, I wouldn't have talked about it this vulnerably. And if I would have recorded it midway through the year, maybe I would have done it, but I would have had a knot in my stomach the entire time, and I would have had so much resistance to actually then posting it. Whereas like today I'm sitting here with just so much conviction in the fact that it's so important for me to share that I do not have it put together all the time, that I do not have everything working so seamlessly in the way that I want it to, that things aren't always on what feels like an upward spiral, even though everything is always unfolding in my favor. And to sit where I am right now and like genuinely just be like, y'all, we're all just humans. And that doesn't mean that we don't have the power inside of ourselves to create the lives that we desire or to live lives greater than we could have ever imagined. It's that you can be human and still do that. That you don't have to be this unrealistic version of yourself, this quote unquote higher self, this it girl, that girl, whatever you see online with all of these influencers who make it seem as though everything is so perfectly put together. And that's not to shit on those influencers, but it's just to be like, hey, you can be human. You can be human. You can be yourself. You can be imperfect. You can be flawed. You can be so far away from what you feel like you want to be right now and still be capable of having, being, and doing every single thing that you desire. And you have everything that you need inside of you to manifest a life so much greater than you could ever imagine. And so walking into 2025, I hope you know that. I hope you know that you don't have to dig yourself out of a hole before you then can manifest the things that you want. Or you don't have to make things better before you're worthy of the opportunity. Or you don't have to, whatever it may be, increase your finances, lose the weight, find the partner, whatever it is, before you can then manifest the life that you desire for yourself. It all starts from just acknowledging that your humanness is what makes you so special. Your flaws, your insecurities, your things that drive you crazy, the ego talks, all of it. That's not you being taken off of your path. That's you on your path. And the more that we can see each other as human and not idolize people via social media or TV or any of these things, and genuinely just be like, you know what? Beyonce shits too. She's a human. And all of these people that we see on social media or in ways that perhaps you've put them on pedestals or even putting this future version of yourself on a pedestal. Nope, you're still going to be human when you manifest all of the things that you want into your life. You're still going to get triggered. You're still going to have hard days. You're still going to cry. You're still going to want to kick and scream and shout. And that's just part of the process. And I think that that's the piece that I'm experiencing now is that, yeah, I've manifested a life greater than anything that I could have ever imagined. And I still am going to experience hardship and be able to share with all of you that there's so much beauty within that. And there's still so much to uncover and unlearn and move forward in such a powerful way. So I hope all of this makes sense. I'm going to listen to it back and be like, okay, Kat, that was either really good or that was just a whole lot of rambling. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, please reach out to me on Instagram. I'd love to have a conversation with you. If you don't already follow me, you can find the link to my profile down below in the show notes. It's just at Kat Kozad. I'm really excited for 2025. I'm going to be doing a glow up series in 2025, not in this way of trying to make myself unrealistic, just like I was talking about a moment ago, but to show you the things that I'm doing behind the scenes and kind of show you in real time what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis to elevate my life. And I have been very intentional with all of the inner stuff over the past few years, but I haven't put a ton of effort into the external of my appearance or of my life. So I'm really interested in 2025 being able to experience that same glow that I'm feeling internally on the external level, and want to show you all of the things that I'm doing to create that external glow, because I grew up not even knowing like what makeup was. I don't think I wore any makeup on my face until I was like a sophomore in high school, and at that point it was just mascara. So like I've never learned how to do my makeup. I've never learned how to style my clothing. Like I've never learned any of those things, and I'm really excited to take that to the next level in 2025, as well as continue to peel back the layers on just the mental, emotional, and internal stuff. And yeah, all of that to say, come follow me on Instagram and send me a message, because I absolutely love hearing from you guys. And I am just so excited to go on this journey with you even more in 2025. So sending you all my love. I will talk to you next week on the podcast. We still have 1 or 2 more shows before the year ends. I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but I love you, and I will talk to you on the next episode.